Hey everybody, this is Tao at the Forge again this week, and of course, just like everyone else this week, I'm going to be talking about Challenger decks. So, Wizards of the Coast came out with this product called Challenger decks, and I think everybody knows this. They got rid of the dual decks and introduced this, and people were kind of skeptical because in the past, event decks were just kind of terrible. The only one that was really good was the modern event deck, and I don't know what other LGSs did, but many of them just ended up like opening them up and tearing them apart for their pieces, and then selling their pieces like individually, and so it wasn't easy to get a hold of the modern event deck. Um, Still, the other event decks were awful, and so I think people were kind of a little bit skeptical about these, but they really did kind of knock this out of the park. It's kind of like they went to, like, I'm here on MTG Goldfish right now, and it's kind of like they went on here and just took the top four decks in standard and made those. So I think that's pretty good. Now, I'm going to talk about a few other things, but first I want to go through these a little bit here. Now, keep in mind the MSRP on these is going to be $29.99, I believe. Yeah, MSRP $29.99. And they have actually tremendous value. So, let's take a look. The Hazoret Aggro is basically, the Ramonette Red type deck. It's not really Ramonette Red, but like, a burn type deck. You got your value cards as Hazoret and Chandra. Just those two cards alone, just the Chandra alone, is worth the value of the deck. In the next one, you have your vehicle rush, which is basically like a Mardu vehicles type thing. It's got some decent value. A 4 Heart of Kirans already is almost the value of the deck again. And the Spire of Industries and Unclaimed Territories are really strong as well. I'm not going to go through these. Are like there's tons of other channels who've gone through these like card by card and went through, and stuff like that. So I'm not going to go through them too much. This one, the Second Sun Control, is kind of interesting. A lot of people don't really like this deck because it's kind of miserable to play against, but it is fairly competitive, and people, it appeals to a certain type of player like me. I like to kind of play the deck. Like I like to play control decks. I generally like to play blue black decks. Although blue white is okay. I hate playing against blue white decks because I find them when you're on the receiving end of it, it's kind of really terrible. But it does appeal to a certain kind of player. I think that we call them assholes. I'm just kidding, but like there's some players that just like to kind of stymie what their opponents are doing, and kind of win with an alternate win condition. I actually like decks like that. So, anyways, but this one's kind of hard to see the value in it because there's nothing really huge in it. It's not one card that would do it. But you do get your Irrigated Farmlands, your Fields of Ruins, and your Regal Caracal. Just one thing is a lot of people, like, I've watched some videos, and some people say, like, why the hell is Regal Caracal in there? Right? It's kind of a weird include, right? Like, if you think about it, like, this is not really like basically what this deck is trying to do is find your Approach of the Second Suns, get it 7 down in the library, and then dig, and just basically counter and draw, destroy opponents, destroy your opponent's creatures and stuff until you can get that's Approach of the Second Sun card out and win the game. So what the hell is Regal Caracal doing in there? Well, the reason why is it's in sideboard because what will happen is that in game 1, your opponent will see that you're playing Second Sun, and what they'll do is they'll take out all their creature removal and try and put in other types of removal. And then what you do is when they do that, you put in your Regal Caracals, right? And basically then you just kind of go on a sort of a beatdown with that because they have no way to get rid of this, right? So other cats you control get +1/+1, and then enters the battlefield you get 2 cat tokens. So those are going to be 2/2 cat tokens and have lifelink. And then the more of these you have, like, you just kind of pump up your small cat army and kick ass with that. And then at the same time, you're still getting rid of your opponent's stuff, by using your counters and stuff like that. So anyways, that's what Regal Caracal is there for. The last one is Counter Surge. Now, Counter Surge is basically the snake deck where you're just trying to get a ton of counters on stuff, and it's basically a Golgari aggro deck. It's pretty good, and you can see there's some value cards here like Glint Sleeve Siphoner, Walking Ballista, and Verdurous Gearhulk. So all overall, these are very, very competitive decks. Like they're not tier 1, but maybe 1.5 or 2. And they can be made into tier 1s with just a few substitutions here and there. So I think this is actually a brilliant idea from Wizards of the Coast. It allows people to break into Magic. Now, one of the things about this is that it's tough for people to get into Standard when you have to pay like $300 to get in, and you're going to pay for a deck that rotates, so like for $300 you can buy a modern, like a tier 2 modern deck and play with it and have tons of fun, and it will never rotate, and that's a lot better than having a like a tier 1 deck that's going to rotate in a year or whatever. So I think this is really good. As far as trying to get people into the game, it gives you people a lot of opportunity to kind of break in at a decent, at a reasonable price, of course, But there's some other things that I did want to talk about this. Okay, so for instance, some people are saying like, well, why won't people just buy all the decks and then just break them apart and sell them for all their pieces? Like, so for instance, if I buy this Hazoret aggro deck, arguably one of the more valuable ones, and I just sold all the Chandra and the Hazoret and the Glorybringers and stuff like that, I could sell all the pieces for it and just make tons of money. Because basically, if you sold the Chandra and the Hazoret, right, the Chandra alone covers the cost of the deck, then the Hazoret gives you $20 extra. So if you just sold that, you're making $20 per deck, which is like basically like almost like what, 2/3 of your investment back. The problem is that these decks are not a limited run. All right, so I don't think that people will be able to do this. Like, the thing is with the market is that people are only, like, a card's only as valuable as the amount that someone's willing to pay for it, right? So if someone's not willing to pay $28 for one Chandra, then you're not going to be able to get it. So like what will happen is that the more people open these up, right, trying to get them, then the price is just going to drop down, right? And eventually it's going to go to a point where you're not going to, like, the cost of Chandra will probably cut in half, right? So everything in here will kind of cut in half, because why would I buy a Chandra for $28 when I can spend $29 or $30 and get everything else, right? It just doesn't make any sense, and it's not like these things are, I don't think these things will be just massively sold out everywhere. I think at first they will be, but there's no one saying that this is a limited print run, and they're available at places like Walmart and stuff like that. So I think these are going to be like hugely or largely available. Like, I don't think that people are going to have too much of a hard time getting a hold of these, and at first there'll be, like, I think an initial stampede to get them, but after a while it'll kind of cool down. And keep in mind, a lot of these cards rotate later on this year, so after a while then it's going to cool down and people aren't going to want it as much, right? Because even $30 is great, but as closer and closer you get to rotation, the fewer and fewer people are going to want these, right? So I would suspect that the prices here are going to just significantly drop. So if you are planning to just buy them and break them off for their pieces and sell them, you pretty much have to do that immediately, right? Like, as soon as they get out. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to make any money off of this, or you're not going to make huge money off of this, right? Like, if we go down to some of these other ones, like where they're selling 4-ofs and stuff, like again, like here, 4 of Heart of Kiran is $24. Okay, so again, if you try and sell me a 4 of them for $24, right, or even $20, why wouldn't I just spend $30 and get everything else, right? Again, it doesn't make any sense. So again, you would see this go down quite a bit. Now, especially even if I just needed the Heart of Kiran, so like, let's say I just wanted those, right? I could spend $30, sell everything else, even if they're like, if I just sold everything else for like $10, right? It's the same as getting this for, for $20, which is still cheaper than the list price here. So I don't think that like people are going to be willing to pay it. Even like I don't think that people will just be willing to pay that. That's just it, right? Same thing here, right? Like this one I think might be better because there's no huge pieces here. But still, I think again, if people need these cards or want these cards, then they're just going to go to the decks instead of like buying singles for them. Now, that leads me to kind of the second thing, is that whenever a set comes out, it drops the price of certain cards, but then it also raises the price of other cards. Like for instance, like let's say like you have two cards that kind of go together really well, right? So if you increase the price of one card, then you're going to decrease the price of the other one. So for instance, like recently came out was Goblins versus Merfolk. Right, so that kind of flooded the market with Merfolk and Goblin cards. But let's just talk about the Merfolk side, right? Then all of a sudden, more people are going to try and create their Merfolk decks, right? But what that will do is it will spike the cost of Aether Vial, because now Aether Vial is not part of that dual deck, and so people will want to get more Aether Vials to fill out their Merfolk deck. Now, in this case, Aether Vial did not increase in price because it was released in the Iconic Masters. So it was already, the price of it was already suppressed. But I think you should know like what I mean, right? Like, so like when they release like Tarmogoyf again, for instance, like, then Liliana's and stuff like that will go up because typically those two cards go together in Jund decks, right? Like, so the other cards in the deck that are not as partly reprinted will move up, right? It kind of makes sense, right? So anyways, there's a few cards that I think might go up because of this. One of them is Fatal Push. Right, mainly because, where is it here? There is one deck here that is playing it, and they only have it as a one of. I think it's in this one here. Yeah, it's right here. Fatal Push. Now, Fatal Push, I think, is just better than Walk the Plank, right? Especially if you're playing in Ixalan standard, like Merfolk are kind of everywhere. So, I don't think that like Walk the Plank's that good in Merfolk in Ixalan standard, right? So Fatal Push, I think, is just objectively better, right? So I think what you're going to see is like the cost of Fatal Push might go up because people who get this deck will want to get 3 more of them, like to kind of fill out their removal. But it's not really being reprinted anywhere else. And in this case, it doesn't make sense to buy, say, 3 more of these to get like $90 worth of cards just to try and get your other Fatal Pushes. Now, if this was like an alternate art promo or something like that, then the price might go down. But I would expect the price of Fatal Push might actually increase. Still, I don't think that overall like the card prices are going to stay high. I think that overall they're going to go down over time, and especially if you get people like Rudy on Alpha Investments was saying that what he would do, or what some people might do, is just buy a crap ton of these and just open them, sort them, and just sell them immediately. And if that happens, then the market will be flooded with all of these cards and they'll all go down in price, right? So it's just one thing to keep your eye on, right? So if you do need, like if you are planning on buying these right now, you might want to, if it's a risk, of course, but you might want to buy Fatal Push right now if you're planning on getting Counter Surge as a deck. Like think about how you'd like to fill it out and see how it goes. Like going up here, I would not buy 2 or 3 more Chandras right now, because this price is not going to stick around, right? Like because people aren't going to buy this whole deck just to get a Fatal Push, but they will buy this whole deck to get a Chandra, especially if her value is still at 2809, right? So anyways, I wouldn't go and buy Chandra at all. One of my questions is, do you think this will affect investors, right? Like, and I don't mean just these sets of decks, but I mean like the whole practice of selling these challenger decks. I personally think that it will, right? That it's going to make it so that people who will be reluctant to just hoard cards, right? And like, just get a whole bunch of cards and just hoard them because they're, trying to increase their in value, and then sell them for a higher price. And the reason why is because Wizards has shown now that they are totally willing to just reprint like, the most valuable cards, and they know it's going to devalue them, right? So they're going to reprint these like crazy. This is basically an unlimited print run. And so I think that, people who were trying to hoard cards in the past, like, just aren't going to be able to do that. In a way, that's kind of good, because I don't like, I'm kind of in the camp that thinks that when you're playing this game, it's just a game. You shouldn't be necessarily just playing it just to make money, right? Like, when I play, I just play for fun. And yeah, sometimes, you get cards and like they're really good and they increase in value, but other times you buy them and they're expensive and then they lose value, right? So, you just kind of end up breaking even over time, right? Like, there's some people who think that you should always get in here and always make money. And I just don't think that that's reasonable. And like, the amount of work you would have to do, unless you're you're like someone like Rudy at Alpha Investments, where he's opening like hundreds and hundreds of boxes or something like that. Like, the amount of money you're going to make doing this is probably not that high, like, compared to, like, say, if you just got a decent job, right? Like, so I don't know. Like, correct me if I'm wrong. Like, if there's people here making thousands and thousands of dollars, like, selling singles, trading singles or whatever, and they're not part of a huge business, then yeah, let me know in the comments. Like, but I just don't think that really happens. I think a lot of people, like, they have a price memory, so they paid like a lot of money for, like, say, this Chandra Torch of Defiance, and then they never want to get rid of it for this price, for anything less, and so they're trying to hold on to it. But I think Wizards has shown with this product that they're willing to devalue these super high value cards, and I think that's going to affect investors. I don't think this is kind of the genius of this, though. I don't think it's going to affect the local game stores that much, right? And here's why. Right, because the local game store is not paying $29.99 for this. They're probably paying like $15 or $12 or something like that for this. I don't know the exact cost, but they will probably be able to break even. So what will happen is they really have almost no risk. They could buy these boxes, sell as many as they can, and at the end, when the cards start rotating or interest peters out, then what they can do is they can just break it apart, sell it for whatever its singles are, and then they can basically almost like sell it for cost, right? Just get like recoup the cost of it, and there's very little risk in it. Like, they're not going to get hosed on this. So I think that this is a good investment, a really brilliant strategy from Wizards of the Coast, right? I think another question is, will it keep the price of Standard down? And I think absolutely it will. Right? If people can come in and get a tier 1.5 or tier 2 deck, and be super competitive, with it for $30, that's going to create a new standard for Standard, right? Like, I think people are kind of crazy when they have this idea that it's totally normal to pay like $300 to break into Standard, right? Like, like $200 or $300 is ridiculous. Well, it's not ridiculous, but it's a lot. And let's face it, like, a lot of young people want to play and they're really interested, but they can't afford that. You give them, but if it's $30, or in Canada it'll probably be like $40, it'll be way more affordable, right? So if you tell someone, hey, come play Magic the Gathering with me, and just to be competitive, you need like $200 or $300. Right? Oh yeah, and by the way, that deck's going to rotate, so you're going to need that $200 or $300 again, basically every year. Like, your average teenager, or even someone who's like in university or something like that, probably doesn't have that kind of money to be blowing on Magic the Gathering. So I think a lot of people would leave the hobby, at least temporarily, for that. And who knows if they get back into it or not. So I think that, yeah, this will, at least set the standard for Standard, and, lower the price of things to say, like, hey, like, if you just wait for the event decks to come out or the challenger deck to come out, you'll be able to get in and compete, right? The only thing I hope is that they release the challenger deck closer to when they release a new set, right? So when they really come out with a new set, then they come out with the new challenger deck to go with it, instead of waiting towards the end of rotation. right? Or at least wait to maybe like 6 months after the new set comes out, or 4 months or something like that, to see how the meta kind of forms around it, and then release the challenger decks, right? Because that way it gives people a chance to brew, gives people reasons to draft and stuff like that. And then once you kind of see like how it's going, you see where the value cards are, then you can go and print these out, and and get people to still competitive in the game for longer. Right? So will it get more people to play? And I think this is probably the most important question, right? Because in any of these like games, like, and it doesn't really matter. Well, I guess it does matter in the game. It does, like any relatively small game, right? You have to be worried about your player base. Now, people are going to say, "Oh yeah, Wizards is pretty huge. Like, it's not actually a small player base, but actually it kind of is." Right? Like Magic the Gathering is not so huge that it couldn't die. Right? It's the same with a lot of these other games, like Star Wars X-wing, the X-wing tactical game, or Warhammer, or Guild Ball, or any of these other like small time games. Right? Like these kind of niche games where it's just a group of nerdy players that kind of play it. Right? The thing is, if you don't constantly get new blood, then you're not going to be able to replace the people who are leaving the hobby. Now, people are going to leave the hobby for all sorts of reasons, like they have kids and they just don't have time for it, or they got a new job, or they just got bored of it, or they just like don't have time to look at all the cards or whatever, right? Or there's a number of different reasons, like just things happen, right? Or they just die. Right? They just get old or just get in an accident and die. And so over time, you're just going to lose players. Right? So what you need to do if you want to stay alive is to keep getting new players. And if you want to grow, you have to keep growing and getting new players into it. Right? So I think that, again, like, who are the new players? You're probably not getting many 50-year-olds, or people in retirement playing like this. But, maybe that would be a good place to look. But you are probably getting a lot of young kids, like teenagers, but like I said, teenagers can't afford to spend like $200 or $300 on this. Even the people at my LGS, like most of them like can't afford to to get like the decks that they sell, so I mean, it's kind of crazy, right? So like I think these are really great options. It gives you a great chance to pick up some good standard staples and things that would become modern staples as well eventually, and for a really reasonable price. So anyways, those are my thoughts on it. So what do you guys think? Do you think that it's going to increase the player base and standard, or do you think maybe it's just like people just don't want to go to F&M anymore, or do you think like do you think it's going to keep the prices down? How do you think it's going to affect investors? Like, let me know in the comments. Anyways, that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hey everybody, this is Tao at The Forge, and just a reminder that if you do like what I'm doing and you are able to help support the channel, you can always support me through Patreon, and even $1 a month would go a long way to supporting the channel and helping it grow. So thanks for your support so far, and keep brewing. To join an amazing Magic the Gathering community, check out kitchentablemtg.com.